happened over the last year has been a systematic effort to essentially dismantle the opposition.
Cambodia counts ballots in widely expected win for its ruling party. It's Monday, July 30th. This is VOA Asia. Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Stevenson in Washington. Be sure to join us on Facebook at VOA Asia. Also ahead, North Korea hands over remains believed to be U.S. servicemen. Finding homes for Taiwan's stray animals. Questions for Chinese immigrants in New York. An ancient fish diet. And e-gaming. It's all on today's VOA Asia. Cambodians headed to the polls Sunday for an election in which the only viable alternative party has been banned. That's helped the country's prime minister of more than 3 decades to extend his reign even longer. There was little doubt that the country's ruling Cambodian People's Party would win the ballot in a landslide following the dissolution of the Cambodian National Rescue Party late last year. VOA Asia's Ira Melman spoke about the election with Sophal, Assistant Professor of Diplomacy and World Affairs at Occidental College in Los Angeles.
We all expected this outcome given how the election was set up and how the ballot looked.
How did it look, and why is Hun Sen able to get away with this? What has transpired?
Well, the ballot did not include the main opposition, Cambodian National Rescue Party, which won 44% of the vote in 2013 and 43% in commune elections in 2017. And he's able to do that, the Prime Minister of Cambodia is able to do that because he has all the levers of government, including the judiciary, to launch attacks and to dissolve the main opposition party, which is what happened last year. What's happened over the last year has been a systematic effort to essentially dismantle the opposition, shutter the media, independent media that would have covered negative stories or things that the government would have done that would have been suspicious, and to essentially silence all critics. So even independent observers like the National Democratic Institute, which operated for many years in Cambodia, was expelled. Radio Free Asia hasn't been able to operate in Cambodia since that time. And so it's essentially going down a list of enemies that he's had that he needs to get rid of, and he got rid of them.
So what happens now?
The status quo of more of the same could continue. There is that possibility that he would still feel insecure and need to somehow further control conditions around him. I think there's also the possibility, frankly, that he might decide that having secured 5 years, it's time to look at transitions and perhaps moving one of his sons to become prime minister while he remains, of course, in the background as a minister mentor like Lee Kuan Yew was, or maybe taking the cue from Myanmar as a state counselor or something like that, as Aung San Suu Kyi is. But I think the idea here is that there's going to be obviously a need to look at transitions, and then there's also the very remote possibility that having gotten 90 possibly percent of the National Assembly seats, 90%, that they'll feel now able to clean up all the corruption that has made Cambodia a world leader in that area, and certainly the most corrupt country in Southeast Asia. So one hopes, maybe it's wishful thinking, that they'll wake up and decide that it's time to do all those reforms they promised or said they were going to do years ago.
Do you think that is a definite possibility?
It's certainly not 0%, but I don't think it's very likely. I'm not in the camp that believes that old dogs can learn new tricks. There's a way in which things have been done in Cambodia that has essentially made it very difficult, I think, to suddenly stop doing those things.
What does this do on an international scale as far as, number one, Asia is concerned, and number two, the rest of the world, including the United States and China?
For Asia, it's not a great sign. I mean, I think for Malaysia, the recent election there gave people hope that there could be change after many decades of single-party rule. With respect to the United States, I would imagine sanctions of the targeted nature first, but possibly later more from the European Union in terms of trade sanctions, probably the suspension of everything but arms, which is their version of a generalized system of preferences, trading preferences. And then from Australia, I think there may be action on asset freezes because a number of senior government officials have been discovered to own huge multi-million-dollar mansions and companies. For China, I think it's certainly enacted its own version of the Monroe Doctrine, which is to look at Southeast Asia as its own backyard, and for it to essentially increase its sphere of influence in the region. I think to the worries of many Southeast Asian countries, if not the leadership, then at least the people living there. I know that in Cambodia, the beach city of Sihanoukville, with its deep water port, is now considered completely Chinese-controlled, with so much real estate and hospitals catered to the Chinese that Cambodians have to go get health care in Kampot province instead. So there's a sense that they're losing control over their own country. They're not masters of their domain anymore. And I guess the worry would be that if more people feel this way, how is the leadership answering to those worries that they're no longer in control of their own country, that there are portions of the country that are completely overrun by Chinese tourists, visitors, medical tourists, and so on, and that they need to regain some semblance of control.
Sophal, Assistant Professor of Diplomacy and World Affairs at Occidental College in Los Angeles, speaking with VOA Asia's Ira Melman. These are among some of the top Asia stories that you'll find currently trending on voanews.com. Cambodia's ruling party an expected landslide election win. Deadly quake strikes Indonesian tourist island. Japan's latest weather disaster, Typhoon Jongdari. Evacuations ordered as Vanuatu volcano emits clouds of ash. U.S. bottom line on North Korea and Iran complete denuclearization. Expanded coverage of these stories and much more are on Facebook at VOA Asia, and as always, we invite you to stop by our voanews.com website. VOA Asia continues. I'm Jim Stevenson in Washington. A U.S. military plane brought back 55 cases of remains North